G'day guys, it's John here from the Ohazassu Podcast, and this is our first video version of the podcast. And I hope the audio and everything sounds okay, and I hope the video is fine. It's just a very basic setup here. We're just starting out, and we hope that you'll enjoy the show. Okay, so just to give you a quick brief introduction to Ohazassu and what we do here. We're a Japan-based podcast, and my name is John, and I live in Nagoya, Japan. I'm originally from Sydney, Australia, and I've been here for over 10 years now in Japan. And I'm here to basically share information, news, stuff about life, about food in Japan, you name it, anything that's going on around me and in the news and things like that, travel advice or travel information, also safety information. I like to put out as much information as I can when there's updates about earthquakes and typhoons and that kind of thing. Our main activity is sort of based on the X platform, formerly known as Twitter, and you can find us over there at Ohazassu Podcast. Without any further ado, I'd like to start episode number 69. And so we've done, as you can probably tell, 68 episodes already in the past. Those have all been only audio based. We haven't done any video ones up till now, and we're starting with this one here. So welcome and thanks for tuning in to the first video version of the Ohazassu Podcast. Of course, we'll continue doing our audio versions as well. And to sign up or subscribe to those, you can simply go and onto Google and do a quick search for Ohazassu Podcast, and you'll see that we're listed on all the major podcast platforms out there. I'll also put all the links and things like that in the description below. Okay, so with Ohazassu, we basically cover a few topics each episode, and we always end our episode with Word of the Day, where we find or pick up one word from one of the stories that we've spoken about during the episode and go over that. And the explanations and a graphic with the Japanese writing, the text and all that kind of stuff is always also shared on our Twitter or X account as well. So make sure you check it out. Okay, so today's first story is about internet connections over here in Japan at home. And one thing that comes up is, signing up to something like NTT or AU or SoftBank are the three main sort of providers when it comes to internet at home. The cost-wise, they sort of cost around 3,500 to 4,000 yen a month, depending on the kind of contract that you get. But the connection, in my experience, I've always used NTT. The connection has always been reliable and fast, and I've never really had any major problems. The other day, it was probably about 3-4 months ago, I received a flyer in my postbox. I live in an apartment here, and there was a flyer that mentioned something about free internet. Now, I thought this was a bit of a scam because actually when was that? About maybe 2 years ago, a gentleman actually rang my buzzer, and he came up and he seemed very legitimate, and he did this full-on a performance. He was a con man, I think, and he was trying to get me to change internet providers, but he made it sound like he was with NTT and that he was just here to let me know about some kind of an upgrade they were making to the circuit that would affect the whole street. And so I talked to him, and after a few minutes, it became obvious that he wanted me to switch my plan to his company. But anyway, I told him to get the hell out politely, and I got rid of him because it just seemed very dodgy, to be honest. But in this case, I checked with the building manager I actually told him about my previous experience and that I was a bit cautious because of that. And he reassured me, and he said this was actually something that the owner had done or was wanting to do to the building, and that is to install free internet in every single apartment in the building. And the reason behind this, I was like, why would the owner pay for internet? Why would they pay for everyone's internet? And he said it was because it helps them to find tenants when the time comes to find a new tenant. they actually, advertise that in the listing there's a platform called Sumo, for example, where you can look for an apartment. And on Sumo, there are actually like little check boxes for things that you want. You might want you might want to limit your search only to places that have a car park or an elevator, things like that. So this actually helps owners to find tenants more quickly. And obviously, being able to find a tenant more quickly means they lose less money because the room is vacant for a shorter amount of time when they're looking for someone. So for the owner, it's a win. And for us tenants, it's a win because we're saving about 50,000 yen a year, which is a very welcome saving in anyone's books. So that happened. And so how do you go about getting this done? You had to call a phone number on the flyer. And so I called that and just made a booking. They said it's going to take about an hour at most. And so we made a booking and the guy came and he did his stuff and and it was all good. I actually posted about this whole thing on X a few months ago when that happened. And a couple of you, and thank you, by the way, for giving me that advice. A lot of you, or not a lot, a few of you gave me some very valuable advice, and that was to keep my existing NTT internet connection for at least a couple of months to see how the new internet was going before cancelling. Because cancelling your connection in Japan, depending on your contract, it can incur cancellation fees. And then if things didn't work out and you wanted to go back to them, then you have to pay like another fee to reestablish your connection, and you have to get the modem sent out again and all that kind of stuff. It's just a bit of a hassle, to do that paperwork all over again. So I thought that was really valuable advice. And if you ever need to do something like this and you need to sort of switch your internet, or if you're getting free internet, make sure that you follow that as well. Obviously, if your financial situation doesn't allow you to continue, then of course you might not have a choice. But if you're able to continue if money's tight, maybe even just for 1 month, just keep it just in case, because it's going to cost you more money to reestablish the connection with NTT if you decide that you don't want the free internet. But to be honest, I tried the new internet connection for about 2 or 3 months actually, and before cancelling my NTT connection, and everything was fine. I only experienced 1 or 2 very, very brief dropouts. I think it was for about, 10, 20 seconds. And apart from that, I didn't really notice anything. Actually, last week I noticed a couple of small things, but I think that was related to the excessive heat buildup. The guy who installed the modem actually positioned it right behind my fridge. And I actually told him that I was concerned about that because the heat might be an issue. And he was like, nah, it's fine. Don't worry about it. It should work. And it was fine. I mean, that was back in spring, I think. So I didn't have any issues back then, but we've been sweating every day here, in summer here in Japan. Every year seems to be getting worse. And we actually had a couple of weeks here in Nagoya where it was almost like 39 degrees. It was between 38 and 39 degrees every day for a couple of weeks. And behind a fridge is not a cool spot, as you probably know. So, I noticed something was playing up last week and I didn't know what it was. I thought it was the actual internet connection itself. But I went to the fridge and I sort of put my hand behind that, that little space between the wall and the fridge, the back of the fridge, and it was warm. I'm not talking about the modem itself, but just that whole area in general, because I think my fridge is also working overtime trying to keep everything cool inside. So I tried pulling it out, and I pulled it out, and it cooled down obviously a little bit, and I found that my connection was a lot more reliable after that. That may have been a coincidence, I'm not sure, but I do know that electronic devices play up quite a bit when there's excessive heat. So yeah, so that's the only thing I'd say to be careful of is the location of your router and things like that. But that's a whole other topic. But in general, with the whole connection thing, it was completely fine, and it still is fine. And I'm saving about 50,000 yen a year, which is like $500 a year. Okay, next topic. We're going to talk about something funny that happened in the news in Aichi Prefecture, and this is where I'm at in Nagoya, Aichi Prefecture. And for some reason, funny things happen all the time here in Aichi Prefecture. We have a very colourful governor and a mayor, and anytime something happens, they're always in the news. They either say something or do something crazy. It's always kind of fun to see those things. And this particular news story was given to us by MT. Thank you very much for sending that in. We appreciate these kinds of news articles that come up. They're kind of interesting and, although troubling, somewhat amusing. So in Nagoya City, this was about a few months ago, I think, and someone was carrying a whole bunch of private personal documents of either customers or clients or something. It doesn't really go into details in the article of who these things belong to, but 112 pieces of information containing people's addresses and names and probably date of birth and things like that were sort of blown away into the wind when someone holding these documents tripped. And obviously these documents were not in a secure kind of a box or folder or anything, because the wind apparently just made them fly all over the place. So if you don't know why someone might know where you live and what your name is and what your date of birth is, that might have been connected to that. But this is something that keeps coming up in the Japan sphere quite a bit, the analog nature of things that contain personal information, the use of fax machines, things like that. But it seems whatever people do, regardless of whether it's digital or paper-based, there always seems to be some kind of a mess up, and these kinds of things happen. But I just found it quite amusing that in this day and age, I mean, it's 2024 and people are losing confidential pieces of information due to gusts of wind when they trip over or something. I don't know. I know it's not a good thing that happened, but it's just I just find it's so crazy that it's kind of amusing that this kind of thing can happen in this day and age. Anyway, I hope they're more careful in future, and I hope they invest in a little, like something with a zip or a box with a lock or something like that, because it's really something that shouldn't have happened. But yeah, keep your eye out for news that comes up in Aichi Prefecture, because it's an interesting place. Okay, guys, this brings us to the final sort of segment in our episode, and that is Word of the Day. Today's Word of the Day is it came up through something that happened a few months ago with a friend of mine. We were working together overseas. This was probably back in June or July or something. And we were doing something. I think we were eating something, lunch or something like that. And we were talking about how we always get the same thing, but today we felt like something else. And he also speaks Japanese, and we were sort of like, oh, what, that word uwaki, and uwaki actually means to have an affair in Japanese. But it's often used in this situation as well, when you always get the same thing, and then that day, for some reason, your heart desires something else. So it's similar in that sense to having an affair. It's like, you see something that you don't usually have, and you sort of, for some reason, you desire it that day. You sort of go, I really, really want, instead of a Big Mac, I want to have a double cheeseburger today, just the once. And so you have an affair with the double cheeseburger. And I thought that was kind of interesting. I mean, the only sort of example I can think in modern sort of comedy is there's a Seinfeld episode. Sorry if you don't know about Seinfeld, but I'm a bit of a Seinfeld fan. But there's a Seinfeld episode where Jerry goes to his barber, who he's been going to for, probably 20 years or something. And there's a new young barber there at the barbershop. And while the owner's out, the young barber actually steps in and cuts Jerry's hair. And so this is the first time someone else is cutting Jerry's hair, the first time in like 20 years probably. And Jerry really, really loves this guy's haircut, like the way that he cuts his hair. And but he feels really bad. He feels like he's committed adultery. And so it turns into this. That's basically what the whole episode is about. And he's sort of like running around, sneaking behind his barber's back, getting haircuts done in secret, things like that. But that's one example of, I can share in English. But when it comes to inanimate things, like that involves people. So I think they were able to successfully pull off that analogy. But when it's like with food or drinks, I don't think we really do that in English, not in my experience anyway. And so I think it's quite interesting how in Japanese it's flexible in that sense, and you can actually use the word uwaki, which means an affair, with things like food or anything where you're straying from your regular routine. You can basically use that word and it makes sense. So that's today's word of the day, uwaki. Anyway, that brings us to the end of the episode. Thank you very much for tuning in and for watching our first episode on YouTube. If you want to support us, please subscribe to the channel and press the like button. And I'll put all the links to our social stuff down below in the description. And we'd really appreciate it if you followed us and shared us with your friends as well, if you found this information useful. Okay, everyone, thanks very much. This was John from Nagoya at Ohazassu Podcast, and I look forward to seeing you at the next episode. Bye for now.